Diablo 4 has arrived. As the forces of hell gather, only you can stand in their way. Journey across the expansive open world of Sanctuary. Choose from 5 powerful classes, then progress them to fit your playstyle. Adventure with your friends in up to 4-player co-op with cross-play and cross-progression on all platforms. Welcome to hell. Diablo 4, available now. Rated M for mature. Tap the banner or visit this episode's page to learn more.
Today on CityCast Boise, happy Friday! It's been a gorgeous week, and I've got lead producer Frankie Barnhill and contributor George Prentice with me to break down the stories behind the headlines. We're digging into the zoning code rewrite, where the city's at with its lofty carbon neutral goals, and is parking at the root of all our problems? It's Friday, June 16th. I'm Emma Arnold, and this is what Boise's talking about. Hi, George. Hi, Frankie. Thanks for being here.
Hi.
Good morning.
So, George, let's start with you. You just talked to Steve Burgos, the Director of Public Works, about how the city of Boise is doing in regards to their, pretty ambitious carbon neutral goals. How are we doing?
Well, according to him, we're doing fairly well. I think he couches most of his answers when I ask that question. I'm obsessed with these goals. I think these goals are fascinating. So just to remind folks, we're talking about the city, which is to say, let's say government, to be carbon neutral by 2035. And then for the city, which is to say all of us, to be carbon neutral by 2050. And every time I see the mayor, I ask her, how are we doing with those goals? Because the days are ticking by. I think they're extremely ambitious. And the skeptic in me is thinking, we may come close, but really? Are we really doing that well? Well, Steve Burgos does a lot of heavy lifting. As Director of Public Works for the city of Boise, it's his job to look at the city's climate action plan every waking moment that he's at work and to make that happen. So we're talking about electrifications of buildings and the fleet, et cetera. And he says we're doing okay. So I ask the same question you just asked. All I can do is ask, but I think we have to keep asking.
Yeah, totally. And I want to throw this in here just because it was a really interesting conversation. But you're seeing a lot of companies and entities do this sort of carbon neutral busy work. And I wondered, do you get a sense are these real changes, or is this some of this kind of shuffling around that we see companies are doing?
I think as far as companies, quite frankly, the answer is it depends. It depends on what the company's motivation is. If they're answering to shareholders, it's probably real. If they're painting some PR picture or putting together a 30-second ad, I'd be skeptical of it. And, of course, it dovetails right into the conversation of carbon neutral credits, right? And offsets. Yes, all of our CEOs are taking jet planes, but we're buying these credits to offset that. And that's where I think skepticism is warranted.
But in the case of the city, though, right, George? I mean, they have to answer to voters. It's not shareholders, it's voters. And this has been a big initiative, certainly for McLean and for other city council members, too.
It is. And I think it's up to us to hold their feet to the fire, if you will, and to keep asking those questions. But yeah, it has to be transparent. We can't just ask Steve Burgos, how we doing? And he says, well, we're doing fine. Well, we spent the better part of 15 minutes talking about, well, what does that mean? And what did you do last year? And what are you doing this year? What will you do next year? And he mapped that out, actually, of which buildings are being electrified, how many of the vehicles are being electrified, et cetera. I think it's good news if indeed you advocate for a climate action plan. I think we also have to recognize that there are some people in this city, especially in an election year, who think that this is not where we should put our energy or resources, pardon the pun. But Lauren McLean's all in on this, and I think that's going to be very much a part of her campaign. And the people who support her, I think this is pretty high at the top of the list of the reasons why they support Lauren McLean. That climate action plan has her fingerprints all over it.
What did Steve have to say about water? I know the city is really committed to keeping our water supply local, but is that happening?
It is, and I'm fascinated by water recycling. So the city had planned on a water. So what is water recycling, right? What we're talking about is, and I'm going to make this as simple as possible, but what we're talking about is a drought-free supply, right? Of recycling, not all water that goes in the sewer, but a select amount of water, especially water that can and should be recycled chemically and through treatment, etc. And it is a science. It's a real science. So the city was always going to do this, but then Micron announced their huge expansion, which, and if most people don't know, Micron requires an extraordinary amount of water in their production cycle. So they require a water recycling plant. So they have to build one. Steve Burgos and Lauren McLean wave their hands and say, hi, we'd love to work with you on this expansion. And as a matter of fact, we'd love to partner with you on this water recycling. So on Micron's dime, the city is partnering with Micron to build technically Boise's first massive water recycling facility in the next, let's say, 7 or 8 years. The city uses that experience, especially when it comes to the cost and process, et cetera, to then duplicate that so that it is the city's, the public's water recycling plant. But imagine recycling water, a resource that is so endangered, that is so threatened. It's rather exciting when you think about it.
Yeah, and it's very forward thinking. I loved your question, by the way, about the Boise River and what the city is doing to protect it. I thought that was a really important piece of this water recycling thing, too.
He mentioned that, and I think it was a year ago, that they discovered freshwater mussels in a part of the Boise River, a species which they had not discovered, well, certainly in anyone's memory. And that is a sign of a healthy river. And that's not to say that it's hard work. And they've got to work on this every day, as far as especially the temperature of the river, right? Especially when we think about it this time of year. But I always come back to that question. I'm sure you do, Emma. I'm sure you do, Frankie. What are we doing to give the Boise River the respect it deserves?
Yeah. When it comes to recycling, though, I'm just curious, you two. I think I know the answer because I know you two pretty well. But is there an ick factor here at all for either of you? The idea of recycling water and potentially, I mean, I know we're way away from this. And first off, it's used for, things like cooling down machinery at Micron and like not people actually turning on their tap and filling up a glass of recycled water and then drinking it. Does it freak you out at all to think about that potentially being a future?
Not at all, but I bet a lot of people would probably say yes. But, if we're talking about commercial use, especially production, microchip production, et cetera.
Right.
Yeah, I'm all in.
Yeah, it doesn't, no ick factor for me. I mean, maybe that's because I've been to every field trip that my kids have ever gone to at the Boise watershed. So I know how much of our water is being recycled.
You love the watershed, Emma. We know. Yes.
It's my favorite field trip. But yeah, no, it doesn't, no ick factor for me. In fact, I'm super, like George, really excited about it. I think it's great news. And I'm happy to see that the city is being so forward thinking in this instead of letting growth overwhelm us and watching Lucky Peak go, lower and lower and lower and like Lake Mead, and doing the Vegas thing of being like, crap, So yeah, I think it's really exciting, actually.
And I love what Steve Burgos said. He said, we are asked all the time, why are we doing this? We're not in a crisis. And the answer to that is, to your point, Emma, well, yeah, but just look around, right? And who's to say that our number isn't up next, where we are in a crisis? I love the fact that I don't know enough about water recycling. I just want to know more. And so the education piece, I think, is exciting. I want to learn more. How much of this could be consumed? Could we use some of this in washing, commercial washing, personal washing, et cetera? And in what kind of production? I just want to know more.
Are we headed for a recession? What is a gray divorce? How do you incorporate InsurTech into your business? Financial professionals have questions. YourThrivingPractice.com has answers. From timely articles and insightful podcasts to eye-opening workshops and analysis from industry experts, they've got everything you need to be a trusted source for your clients. Your Thriving Practice. Know what's now and know what's next. Learn more at YourThrivingPractice.com.
This episode is brought to you by Vonage. Is your business ready to integrate live video chats into your app? The Vonage Video API makes it simple for developers to build custom solutions that make sense for your business. From providing faster tech support and better customer service to hosting more productive meetings and classes, live video enhances every conversation. Go live on your terms with Vonage. Learn more at Vonage.com.
I want to move on because, Frankie, we have been talking about this so much this morning. This week has been huge for the zoning code rewrite, which ties into all this, right? The water, the carbon neutrality. But What is going on right now with the zoning code rewrite?
Yeah, talking about the future of resources, we're talking about the future of what Boise will look like and who Boise will be livable for is another part of that same question. So the zoning code rewrite, we've had public meetings all week. Just to be fully transparent to listeners, we're recording this on Thursday morning, and actually the city council is supposed to vote Thursday night on whether or not they're going to endorse the plan that has been, moved to this part, like we're at the finish line almost, or if they want any changes made. So we'll have follow up on what ends up happening. But yeah, this is a once in a generation thing that, our current zoning code is from the 60s, which is just insane to think about how long we've been living with the same zoning code. So everything from affordable housing to like where we can have local businesses. Like if you like, a Roosevelt Market, could you maybe see one in your neighborhood in the future? Whether or not you have to drive everywhere. Can you walk places? Whether or not there are drive-throughs all over your neighborhood or along corridors. Those are all like questions that are built into this question of what should our zoning code look like for the future.
And it's getting pretty heated. Surprisingly, I think it's funny because it, on the surface, seems like this very boring topic, but then people are really taking sides.
Yeah, if you dig into this, and of course, politics are coming into it. We've already mentioned the election. We've got the mayoral election and city council elections coming up. And so it's kind of all happening at this swirl in the same time where people are starting to take sides about this and kind of, some Democrats, for example, that are on opposite sides of something. It's not necessarily just a red and a blue issue or a Democrat versus Republican issue on this. Though there are some lines you can probably connect a few groups. So there's one group called Reject Boise Upzone, and that's pretty clear what their view is. They do not like the zoning code rewrite as is, and they actually had a protest at City Hall last week. It was okay attendance for that. Their basic concern when it comes to the question of how do we get more housing that is affordable, not necessarily affordable housing, because that's a different category technically, but housing that an average Boisean can at least rent, if not buy someday, right? That question's huge. And they're concerned that the zoning code as it's rewritten will take away some kind of already existing housing that's currently affordable. So that's one of their gripes. They have other concerns as well. And then the other side is this group called Neighbors for Boise that's in favor of the zoning code rewrite. And that they're saying that really, seeing fourplexes, multiplexes, and other things that are currently not legal in a lot of places in the city seeing those changes come in could really help with affordability, because part of the issue is inventory, a lack of houses to buy or rent in general, which drives up demand. So their feeling is that the changes to density in particular are a good thing, and they want to see it happen. I will say, too, I don't know if you guys, did you note, the Idaho Capital Sun noted the census data from 2021 to 2022 that Boise actually had a slight decline in population, very minor, like 0.6% or something. But the census folks to the Cap Sun said, yeah, we think this is a housing affordability issue, that people were moving out of Boise proper and, moving into other parts of the Treasure Valley or moving out of state potentially. But, this housing affordability piece is just, we can't escape it. And it is so key to the zoning code stuff.
Yeah, and you mentioned other cities. I mean, the zoning code rewrite is only going to affect Boise, but are other cities in the region going to go through the same thing? Are they going to need to rewrite code? I think of the episode we did recently on Star and the exponential growth, and that census data showed huge growth in Star, which is such a small community. So Do you think other cities will follow suit in this?
It'll be interesting to see if other cities in Idaho decide, or like Meridian, if they're going to update their code, right? That could be interesting. I'm not actually sure how long the Meridian code has been around, but we have seen a northern neighbor, Spokane, Washington. They're updating their zoning code. Boise Dev did a great article where they kind of dug into like these other cities that are similar sized and are also seeing population increases and affordability issues being major all of a sudden. And Spokane's taking a similar general approach of density and increasing. So we're not like out of step with other cities that are similar sized, similar situations and problems. I don't know, George, are you thinking about like how, I'm always interested in how other cities are doing and how we're thinking about it as Boise, like just goes through so many changes.
I think when you revisit a zoning code, it is a city planner's dream and a city planner's nightmare. It's a heavy lift. And so I think it will, quite frankly, depend on how good the city planners are in those communities. It's a really, really hard thing to do because you are bound to anger a good sector of the population. What I'm fascinated this week is by the messiness and the wonderful part of how messy this is. This is truly democracy. You've got people who are pushing out absolute falsehoods. You've got people who are pushing out amazing, really good, rich ideas. And if you take a look at the city council members, you can see more than a few of them taking notes like crazy.
Diligent notes.
And they'll interrupt someone's testimony and look over at staff saying, are you writing this down? Are you writing this down? Which I think means that as written, it's probably not going to pass as written. It has to be tweaked if you want to make it better. And then, of course, there's always the chance of it being rejected. But I think there's a really good chance of it being tweaked. I love just the wide variety of opinions. And on Wednesday night, some opinions boiled over a little bit. One woman called for the mayor to instantly resign. And of course, we've heard a number of people argue, well, we shouldn't even consider this until after the November election.
Right.
To which a number of council members say, well, I've actually been working on this for the last 3 years, but yet you want someone to come in here and just vote on this?
That's part of the reason why I was elected. Yeah.
So, and by the way, that's not to say that all of these arguments aren't valid.
Sure.
But we're also in the process of crafting a new budget for the city. And you can only imagine how big the budget is. You will be able to count on your fingers and toes the amount of people who testify in the budget hearings. People just don't show up for things like this. So I love the fact that people are engaged. Yes, a number of people are going to get ticked off, and it is an election year, but this is wonderfully messy, and I think some good stuff is going to come out of this.
Yeah, definitely. And it's interesting, this conversation we're having today, a lot of times when we do the weekly news roundup, we talk about three very separate issues that don't really have a lot of tie-in. But everything in this conversation is all connected. And like, George, the next thing we were going to talk about was this really interesting interview you did on parking, which on the surface, again, seems kind of like a boring topic, but like it was a fascinating interview, but also like really ties into this larger debate we're hearing around the zoning code.
Parking is right in that sweet spot, right? So I saw a review in the New York Times Sunday Book Review a couple of weeks ago of a new book called Paved Paradise. Henry Graber, who writes for Slate, he covers transportation and housing for Slate. He's the author. I instantly reached out to Penguin Books and said, can I talk to him? And he reached out and said, oh, I've written a number of stories about Boise. I'd love to talk to you. So I was all in on this. And I mean, just some of the highlights. There is more housing for each car in the United States than there is housing for each person.
Wow.
I mean, right? That's
Yeah.
a jaw dropper there. In his research, when he talked to people about letting new neighbors into their neighborhood, when people talked about the city changing and growing, the thing they feared most wasn't crowded classrooms. It wasn't neighbors who spoke a different language at home. It was losing their parking space. And then, how about this? Most American cities make more money from illegal parking fines than they do from the meters or the garage taxes combined.
Wow.
I mean, just drop the mic on any one of those. But at the heart of this is this very personal entitlement and I think it's fair to say obsession that we have with parking in our culture. And so part of the zoning code is how many parking spaces, and especially for a business are appropriate. And if you don't have a robust public transportation system, people are going to say, yeah, but I need a parking space because we don't have a robust public transportation system. And then there's that chicken and egg conversation we always have about transportation. So, but parking is so personal, right? I mean, how many of us have been in a blizzard, right, where we dig out our space in front of our house? Or maybe there's a street concert or an event at the park and you put chairs out in the street to make sure that your space is there, right? I mean, it's crazy in spite of the fact that that's public space.
Yeah, that was something from the interview that really like, it's like something you know, but then when you hear it, you like finally go like, oh my gosh, you're right. Like
I've done that.
Yeah. And he talked about how people get attached to like the curb outside their house as their parking, their property, even though it's a public space, like you said, but that somehow extends to the neighborhood around them. And as your guest said, it becomes like this reason to oppose change of any kind. And I just thought that was so interesting. Like that this, it's kind of starts with this little spot in front of your house that you defend, like you've seen videos of people coming out and screaming at someone for parking in front of their house. And it's like, this is all public property. These streets, we all own them. So,
and then in a downtown core, you have all of this, these parking ramps that empty out at 6 p.m., right?
Mm-hmm.
All of this valuable space. And what do we do about that? I mean, these are really good conversations. And, very quickly, it's a conversation about housing or the lack thereof and how much space and how much money we spend on parking.
Yeah. And I think, oh gosh, that ties in so well. Okay. So personal anecdote is that I recently lived in one of those new downtown apartments. I lived in the Lucy, and the Lucy didn't have parking that came with it. Like the building didn't come with it. But what they did was they worked with the hotel like a block away so that you could get a parking permit there. Really, you could get a parking permit on your own. Whatever. You could have bought it on your own, which is, I think one of your guests was talking about that. Like when people who live in a place that doesn't have parking that's offered to them, they go and find it somewhere, which is what we did. So, but it meant that personally, for us, my husband and I, it meant that when we decided to move into this downtown apartment, we downsized to one car because on top of the fact that we were living in downtown, so we could walk everywhere, we were, lucky enough to be able to work from home for the most part. And if we needed to get in the car, we could like figure it out between the two of us, and we're able-bodied, or we could hop on the bike, right, or whatever, or get on the bus if we can make it work for our schedules. And that to me was like the perfect encapsulation of what this is all about, and like the zoning code maybe bringing down the number of parking spaces, because that's one of the things they're looking to do in the current rewrite. But what it did for us is it did exactly that. It forced us to get rid of a car that we probably didn't really need. And, we paid for one parking space instead of two.
And look at how many parking spaces are being built over in downtown Boise currently. All of those lots that are being replaced. It's changing. It's changing right now.
Yeah, it made me think of the quote from your guest, which has been bouncing around in my head ever since I listened to the interview, about saying, like, you can't create conditions under which mass transit will succeed unless you are first willing to take parking down a peg in your hierarchy of needs. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, that's so good and so true.
So fascinating.
And when I think of all the parking, like, you think of all that space downtown that's being taken by parking, and like the people it could house, the restaurants that could be there. And Frankie, you're telling this anecdote, but I know you had voiced to me how frustrating that was, having to park there, not having a spot that was always there for you. If the hotel is busy, you're fighting for parking.
Yeah.
And that takes up a part of your brain, of your space. I have friends that live in the North End who are constantly trying to find parking in front of their house, and if you've ever lived in an apartment, you get one spot. And if anybody comes to visit you, there's 3 free spots in the entire parking lot of the apartment that everybody fights over. So
can I ask a question? Have either of you ever lived for an extended period of time without a car?
I have. Yeah. Several times. Yeah. With kids, which is a real pain in the butt. But yeah,
couldn't imagine that.
Yeah, and I did that for a couple of years when I lived in Manhattan. And I think, how did I do that? It's like, gosh, I did just fine.
Yeah.
Right.
I did just fine.
But you had public transit that was available to you that made it really simple. Yeah, I did in college, which, like on a college campus, I remember always bumming rides with friends who had a car, or just figuring it out. Like, okay, get on the bus to go down to downtown Minneapolis and go to the museum because I don't have a car, but I want to go check out that cool art exhibit. Like, you just figure it out if you're able-bodied and if all of those things. So that's part of it too, is like, how do we balance all of these different needs and take the community as a whole? But the staggering number that you said about how many parking spaces versus how much space there is for humans to live and put their head at night and lay down is pretty crazy.
And a lot of that is, quite frankly, taxpayer-funded money. In other words, we're spending more public money on housing cars than we are people. Let's just pause for a moment right there. It's like, what?
Yeah. And, your guest talked about not building in, the strip mall sprawl, way of doing things anymore. And, that's what this zoning code rewrite is a big piece of, is creating these neighborhood areas where people don't have to travel outside. They have a grocery store, they have restaurants. You could live without a car, which, as living in West Boise is a dream. Like, it's impossible, like I would love to have a little neighborhood cafe over here, but we'll see. So interesting. We'll be obviously keeping an eye on that. I'm very interested to see what happens tonight with the zoning code vote, but we will keep an eye on that.
I think it's, goodness knows, I don't think it's going to end this week, this conversation, and for all the right reasons.
Well, let's end on a fun thing. I know Frankie has one. I hope you have one too, George. What are you excited about for Boise this week? Frankie, let's start with you.
Yeah, I'm excited and just really, get some hometown pride for Heaven is a Junkyard is the new album by Youth Lagoon, a.k.a. Trevor Powers, who is a longtime Boise musician, and it's his latest album, and it just received Best New Music from Pitchfork. And if you're not a Pitchfork follower, if you're not super nerdy into like indie music stuff, that might not mean much, but it means a lot for anyone who cares about like seeing an artist perform in a city that you normally wouldn't. Because what this will probably mean is that, well, it's just awesome. Congrats to Youth Lagoon and Trevor Powers for getting that. And it's good. It's a good thing for Boise's music scene to continue to get that shine. His album has a lot of Idaho in it, like Idaho Alien is the name of one of the singles. It's great. Really beautiful, evocative songwriting in this album. And so I'm excited for that. And the fact that we got a little bit extra shine in our arts and culture scene and a little recognition from a very well-known and very well respected national music publication.
Yeah. Well, hooray, Trevor, and good job. And that's very exciting. George, what about you? Do you have one?
I do. I'm very excited, as I am each year, for World Refugee Day in Boise, which is Saturday. I think this is the 4th of July, Christmas, and every ethnic holiday into one. It's Boise's best day. It is what I have loved over the years is it's on Saturday when the downtown market is happening. So a lot of people kind of stumble upon it because it's near the same space. They just keep walking. They think they're in the market, and all of a sudden they're smelling like really good stuff cooking and some interesting handbags, etc. Oh, well, this is interesting. All of a sudden you're in the middle of a refugee celebration. And so I think most of our listeners know that Idaho, and Boise in particular, has resettled quite a few people. Of late, a number of people from Ukraine and certainly from Democratic Republic of Congo. I had a chance to meet with a young woman this week from the DRC who her world turned upside down in Democratic Republic of Congo. She is separated from her parents. She thought her parents had died, and she and her sister survived resettlement camps, refugee camps, and finally came into Idaho and discovered that her parents were very much alive. They are all together now. She has recently graduated with a degree in psychology. She's a new mom, and she's going to be one of the MCs at World Refugee Day in downtown Boise. And my heart skipped a beat when I just heard this woman's story. And I love everything about World Refugee Day. And by the way, if you are struggling with what is an American, if you're looking for some kind of reference to what is your citizenship, in the middle of World Refugee Day is a citizenship ceremony, and you will see people from dozens of countries pledge allegiance to their new home. And they have passed a citizenship that most of us could never pass.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
If you're questioning all about the world as it is and how difficult your lot in life is, World Refugee Day will fill your belly. Amazing music and performance. I love everything about it. And it's this Saturday.
Well, I will be at that. That sounds so fun and so beautiful. I think I've never or haven't been in a lot of years anyway. So that sounds really, really fun. Yours are both so Boise-centric and perfect, and mine is completely self-absorbed. But that's what I have.
I want to hear it.
Let's go.
Yours is Saturday. We are having a graduation party for my son, and it's a little delayed, but we weren't able to do it until this weekend. And I'm so excited for him. He is headed to BSU next year. He's going to live in the dorms and do the whole, college experience. And I think that that's so fun. And yeah, I'm just excited. Boise, I'm sending you a citizen. I made you a citizen, and he's out there. He's got his voter registration card. He is ready to participate in democracy and all other kinds of things. So I don't know. Yeah, it's just this huge, this is my second kid to graduate high school and to go to BSU. And I'm so excited for this weekend and to celebrate him. We're having a big party, and I'm just so excited for him to. He's still a teenager, so he's like, "Are people going to give me money?" And you're like, "Well, yeah, but that's kind of there's more to it than that." But yeah, I think it'll be really fun. And then Sunday is Father's Day, which is hilarious because last weekend on Sunday, my husband Alex thought it was Father's Day, thought we all forgot.
Oh, no.
Made us breakfast, made pancakes and eggs and bacon for everybody. And finally around 4 or 5, I happened to mention it. And I'm like, no, that's next weekend. And I just thought it was so funny that he thought we all completely forgot Father's Day. Didn't fuss him, made us all breakfast, puttered around mowed the lawn. So this Sunday we have a bunch of stuff planned for him to make him feel special, since he clearly didn't expect anything. We were like, okay, we better. So we're doing board game Olympics. He's a big board game guy. So we're having a big board game party for him on Father's Day.
Oh, that's so sweet.
Yeah, it'll be fun. I'm excited. For that.
Oh my gosh. Yay. Congrats, Henry, right?
Yeah, it's my Henry. Yep.
Congrats, Henry. Product of Boise School District. So that's great.
Product of the Boise School District. Yep. Went through all the way, just graduated from Capital, love Capital, great school, all the teachers and staff there are so amazing. So
can we talk about him? Can we talk about him just for a couple more seconds? So
yeah, sure.
Has he thought about what he wants to do? What does he want to study?
Well, he's undecided. My older kid, when he started BSU, he knew he wanted to be an engineer. He went immediately into the College of Engineering, found his people. He's got a whole Dungeons and Dragons group now. He really found his people so immediately.
Oh, that's too good.
Henry is going to be playing rugby, I think. But he's not super sure what he wants to pursue. I actually think he might get into journalism. He has a very deep sense of justice, and he's a very curious person. So I haven't been pushing one way or the other, but I have mentioned a couple times, like, well, you love to read, and you're very nosy. There might have a future.
Ask a lot of questions.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. So, I think you don't fear authority in any way, which has been very difficult to parent you. But I think I don't know. It'll be so interesting to see. And I love, he's going in just very blank slate. We're looking at classes. He's taking just core stuff. He's going to be undeclared, not feeling a ton of pressure, so. Yeah, I don't know. It'll be really interesting to see what he decides on. But he's a smart kid, and he could literally probably do just about anything. So, yeah.
So is he chilling this summer in anticipation of that?
Okay, I told him to chill. I told him, just take the summer off because he was going to get this job. And I was like, this is your last summer to be a kid. Just chill, go camping, just take it easy. He got a full-time construction job. And he's also doing rugby practice after work. So he works 7 a.m. to 5 at this very grueling construction job. And then he goes to rugby practice right after that for 2.5 hours.
Wow.
And he's like you, George. I don't know if he has a lot of chill in him. He's a fill 12 hours kind of boy. So I encouraged him to just hang out, but he's busy. He's a busy man. He wants to make some money and do some traveling and stuff like that. So,
well, congratulations to you.
Thank you. Yeah, it feels pretty cool. Being a parent, you're just doing it forever. And it just seems like there's no end in sight. And there's not, actually. He came over last night and made me clip his toenail. So you never are really done. He had an ingrown toenail. It's a mom thing, George. Don't worry about it.
Okay, all right.
What a perfect way to end this podcast.
What?
Yeah, it's mom shit, okay? I had that to myself. I was chilling. I was doing yoga.
Stuff I ever asked my mom. Wow.
I know. He came over and was like, I have an ingrown toenail. You have to get it. You're my mom. I was like, my mom's never done this. This is a whole new age of parenting. Wow. So, yeah, I don't know. I coddled him, George. I coddled him.
Cool.
What are you going to do?
That's a good thing.
Well, Frankie, George, thank you so much, both of you, for being here. And George, come back soon. We love having you on.
Thanks so much. Have a great weekend, too.
Yeah, you too.
Yeah, happy Father's Day and happy Juneteenth to people, too.
That's all for today here on CityCast Boise. The show is produced by Frankie Barnhill, Evelyn Avitia, and me, Emma Arnold. Blake Hunter writes our Hey Boise newsletter, and our music is by Up Is the Down Is the. We're out Monday to mark Juneteenth, but we'll be back Tuesday with more stories from around the city. Bye.